I just finished this book yesterday. It's called True Hallucinations by Terence McKenna. And for those who are unfamiliar with Terence McKenna, he was an ethnobotanist who was very popular in the 70s, 80s, and 90s for his propagation of the use and interest in and just the study of psychedelic mushrooms. At the time, for I guess for the better context, at the time when he was getting popular in the 70s, psychedelic mushrooms were not really a thing yet, as in the West at least. In the early 20th century, many philosophers and psychologists were being injected with mescaline, and in the 40s, I think, is when Albert Hoffman would have invented LSD, but it was only, and that was what really propagated the 50s, 60s in terms of psychedelic use, but then it was only in the 70s and 80s from I think it was directly from Terence McKenna, that the use of psychedelic mushrooms really came into the forefront of the Western imagination. And this book in particular is about his discovery of them in the Amazon with his brother and a couple of their friends. The story goes is that they were reading about, they heard about this mysterious plant called the oo-koo-he, and the oo-koo-he was a mysterious sacred plant from a local tribe in the Amazon, and they wanted to have like an adventure to go there and figure out where this plant is and maybe perhaps try it and see what they can learn about it, or perhaps what they can learn from a scientific point of view as well as from an experiential point of view. So they venture out to the Amazon, to this place called La Chorrera in the Colombia, I think, and lots of things happen. This book is about their adventures there, and particularly it focuses on an incident of what they were trying to do. There was like an experiment that Terence and Dennis were trying to do, in which they were trying to synthesize some kind of philosopher's stone through some trans-dimensional alchemical things that they were trying to do these things with sound resonances. So they were doing things with particular. I'm not gonna pretend like I understood it, but it was a weird thing. They were trying to create some kind of condensation of energy into one specific point, while after they would, I think it was the idea was that they would take ayahuasca and then they would do the experiment. And it seems like the experiment really took a big toll on their group, because after their experiment was conducted, Terence and Dennis suddenly changed their personality drastically, and particularly Dennis. Dennis was his younger brother. To give a perspective, they were in their early 20s at the time, and Dennis was his younger brother. He got catapulted into what seems like some kind of shamanic, godlike trance for what ended up turning out as a couple of weeks, in which he would disappear in the middle of the night to climb trees and proclaim shamanic things, and he seemed to have the extrasensory powers that, and this is from the book, of course, but it seems like he can read minds, or there was some kind of all-knowingness to Dennis McKenna, to Dennis, but he to some degree, it seems like he was overtaken by some other entity, to some degree. It's not very clear what happens, and Terence, on the other hand, has a more, is seemed by his group members as crazy, because he seems to believe his brother, or believe in the possibility that his brother was somehow really in this extrasensory state. And Terence McKenna sticks by his brother and tries to get his brother back into the reality of things throughout the couple of weeks and succeeds it. And it is a wild adventure, and Terence in particular, he says stuff like he can hear his brother's voice inside his head. He can hear voices in his head that give him directions, give him experiences, visions, premonitions, extrasensory things. And it's interesting because you can read the book. I think it's very possible to read the book in a sense of it being not a fiction novel or non-fiction. Both ways can be read, and you can read it in both ways. And I'm very, very sure that when his stories first came to the West in the 70s, I'm sure many people looked at him as crazy and treated him as a fictional, or like he thought of the events that happened in the Amazon as this crazy tale. But Terence McKenna stuck by it. His brother seems to have slowly distance himself from the experience, because he says he doesn't actually remember most of it. but all we have now is, I guess, this account of it. And I'm not gonna pretend like when I was reading it, I didn't ever think that I thought Terence McKenna seemed kind of crazy, kind of off the deep end, but he has a humor about it. You know, he says that, you know, the difference between him and like a religion, for example, is that the religions don't have a humor about their absurdity, and he understands how that what he's saying is very absurd and non-rational, but he acknowledges it, he understands it, but he still is truly believes what he experienced was some kind of untapped territory, I guess, for human expansion of consciousness. It's very interesting, and with the way he writes about the mushrooms in particular is that so they go there to look for oo-koo-he, and when they go but instead of finding oo-koo-he, they find lots of psychedelic mushrooms, and that's what they end up taking throughout the trip. And he speaks about the mushrooms in a way that is very, he treats them like gods to some degree. He treats them as this higher intelligence that he speaks to. He talks about speaking to the mushrooms. He talks about hearing the voice of the mushrooms. The mushrooms are giving him wisdom from their intergalactic life spans of whatever, and he talks about the stuff in a very lucid manner that really invites the possibility that what he's saying is quite true. And it's very interesting. I think it's a very interesting book. And so one of the things that he talks about in the book, I just want to kind of leave it out, is that one of the things he thinks is his greatest achievement of sorts is that his formulation of what he calls a time wave theory. Time wave zero theory that I'm not going to pretend like I understood what it does, what he was saying, but it has something to do with this changing definition of time, of understanding of time through reading it through the perspective of the I Ching by King One, and particularly King One's sequence of the I Ching, which are these 64 drawings of sorts that he interprets as 64 day cycles that from the beginning of time or whatever, and does all these different things. And one of the things that he seems to predict to some degree with his time wave theory is that the world would end in 2012, and apparently it's actually one of the factors why it really became a big thing. Apart from the Mayan thing, apparently Terence McKenna was also a big factor. He was dead. He died in 2000, but in 2012, people were still thinking about his work in the time wave theory, and how he seemed to have predicted the end of the world. He had lots of eschatological implications to his theorizing, and he made these computer programs and stuff like that seemed to engage with his ideas. But you know, it's interesting, but I don't know if I fully understand it is enough to, you know, not buy into it or whatever. I mean, obviously we didn't, you know, die in 2012, but it's an interesting book, and I really enjoyed it because he writes in a way that's very funny. He has a reverence to the readers as well as the world, I think, and he seems to have lived his life in the pursuit of a higher sense of being, a higher sense of meaning, a higher sense of intelligence and knowledge that really seemed to take over his life. He was someone who never stopped wanting to expand his learning about what makes us human and what makes us our consciousness, you know, what makes our consciousness. And his work has influenced millions of psychedelics all around the world, and he seemed, up to today, he has this very iconic kind of stature within the community, which I think is very interesting. And his brother still alive. His brother wrote a book quite recently about the events in La Chorrera, and I think it's from his perspective, so I'm actually quite interested. I haven't read it. I want to get that book and read what he has to say about it. But this is True Hallucinations by Terence McKenna. It's even whether or not you believe in the mystical experience, I think it's worth reading, even if you perceive it as a fictional text. It's funny, it's engaging, and he has a lot of very interesting insights that I think are worth listening to and reading about. And he was just an interesting guy, and I think any interesting guy is worth learning more about. So yeah.